My name is Marcus Webb, and this is the story of how 3 nights at a remote desert border checkpoint changed everything I thought I understood about the world. This is the story of how I learned that some borders are not meant to keep people out, but to keep something far worse contained within. Marcus had been driving for 6 hours through the Sonoran Desert when he finally saw the checkpoint rising from the heat shimmer like a mirage made solid. The job posting had been vague, but the pay was exceptional. Night shift work at a federal border checkpoint. No experience necessary. Cash payment at the end of each week. He needed the money desperately after losing his construction job in Phoenix, and the eviction notice that followed soon after, 3 months behind on rent, and a maxed out credit card meant he could not afford to be picky about employment opportunities, no matter how strange they seemed. The facility was smaller than he expected, a single-story concrete building, painted in faded government beige, sat beside a 2-lane road that stretched endlessly in both directions. A metal gate arm blocked the southbound lane, while the northbound side remained open. Harsh fluorescent lights mounted on tall poles cast everything in a sickly yellow glow, even in the afternoon sun. Beyond the checkpoint, the desert extended forever in all directions, nothing but sand and rock, and the occasional skeletal remains of dead Joshua trees reaching toward the sky like twisted hands. Marcus parked his beat-up Honda beside the only other vehicle in the lot, a white government SUV with tinted windows and dust coating every surface. He grabbed his backpack and walked toward the front entrance. The heat hit him like a physical force the moment he stepped out of the air conditioning. It was late September, but the desert sun still burned with intensity. Sweat began forming immediately on his forehead and neck. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air conditioning struggled against the heat, creating pockets of cool air separated by warm, dead zones. The interior was Spartan and functional. Gray tile floors, white walls with nothing decorating them except for a few safety posters about hydration and heat stroke. A long counter divided the front area from what appeared to be office space and a break room beyond. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. A woman emerged from the back office. She was maybe 50, with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, and the weathered face of someone who had spent years in the desert sun. She wore a tan uniform that Marcus did not recognize. Not Border Patrol, not Customs, something else entirely, with no identifying patches or badges, except for a simple nameplate that read Chen. She looked Marcus up and down with sharp, dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about him in seconds. "Are you Marcus Webb?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. He nodded and extended his hand, but she did not take it. Instead, she turned and gestured for him to follow her into the office. The office was just as bare as the front area, desk with an ancient computer, a filing cabinet, a small television mounted in the corner showing nothing but static. Chen sat behind the desk and pulled out a thin folder. She opened it and slid a single sheet of paper across to Marcus, along with a pen. "This is your employment contract," she said. "Standard terms. You work the night shift from sunset to sunrise. 7 days a week for the first month. After that, we reassess. Payment is $2,000 cash per week, delivered every Friday morning. You cannot discuss this job with anyone outside this facility. You cannot take photographs or video of the checkpoint or surrounding area. You cannot leave your post during your shift for any reason except a medical emergency. Violation of any of these terms results in immediate termination and forfeiture of all payment. Do you understand?" Marcus scanned the contract. The terms matched what she had stated almost word for word. The pay was significantly better than anything else he had found. He had questions, but something about Chen's demeanor suggested she would not tolerate interruptions. He signed the paper and slid it back across the desk. Chen filed the contract away and stood. She walked to the filing cabinet and removed a large manila envelope. "This contains everything you need to know about your duties," here she said, placing it on the desk between them. "Inside, you will find your shift procedures and a list of rules. The rules are not suggestions. They are not guidelines. They are absolute requirements that must be followed exactly as written, without deviation or interpretation. Breaking any rule will have consequences that extend far beyond termination of employment. Do you understand?" Something in her voice made the hair on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. The way she emphasized consequences carried a weight that went beyond professional warning. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, though he was not entirely sure that he did. "Good," Chen said. She opened the envelope and removed a laminated card covered in text. "This is your rule card. Keep it with you at all times during your shift. Read it now and commit it to memory. You will not have time to reference it when situations arise." Marcus took the card and began reading. The rules were typed in a simple sans serif font. There were exactly 12 of them. Rule 1. Your shift begins exactly at sunset and ends exactly at sunrise. Use the alarm system to mark both times. Never begin early. Never stay late. Rule 2. During your shift, you will monitor both lanes of traffic. The northbound lane remains open at all times. The southbound lane is controlled by the gate arm. Rule 3. Most vehicles traveling south will pass through without stopping. Do not attempt to stop them. Do not make eye contact with their occupants. Do not acknowledge their presence in any way. Rule 4. Some vehicles traveling south will stop at the gate. You will know them because they will turn on their hazard lights before reaching the checkpoint. Only interact with vehicles that have their hazards on. Rule 5. When a vehicle with hazards stops at the gate, approach the driver's side window. Ask for identification. Check the identification against the approved list kept in the desk drawer. If the name appears on the list, raise the gate and allow passage. If the name does not appear on the list, politely tell them they cannot pass and direct them to turn around. Rule 6. If someone stops at the gate without their hazards on do not approach the vehicle, return to the office immediately and lock all doors. Do not look at the vehicle. Do not respond to any attempts at communication. Wait exactly 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, the vehicle will be gone. Do not go outside to verify this. Wait an additional 10 minutes before resuming your normal duties. Rule 7. The radio will sometimes emit sounds that resemble voices. Ignore them. Do not attempt to respond. Do not adjust the frequency or volume. The radio must remain on at all times. Rule 8. Between the hours of midnight and 3 in the morning, you may hear knocking on the office door or windows. Do not investigate the source. Do not open any doors or windows. Continue your normal duties. The knocking will eventually stop. Rule 9. If you see lights in the desert moving in patterns that seem deliberate or intelligent, do not watch them for more than a few seconds. Return your attention to the road. The lights cannot approach the checkpoint, but prolonged observation can attract unwanted attention. Rule 10. The break room refrigerator contains bottled water and prepackaged meals. You may eat and drink as needed. Do not open any container that is not clearly labeled. Do not consume anything that smells unusual or appears to have been opened previously. Rule 11. If at any point during your shift you see a person walking alone in the desert, do not offer assistance. Do not attempt communication. Do not shine lights in their direction. People who walk the desert at night are not looking for help. Rule 12. If you witness anything that violates the natural order or seems impossible, write a detailed description in the incident log. Do not discuss it with anyone. Do not attempt to investigate or explain it. Simply document and continue your duties. Marcus read through the rules 3 times. Each reading made him more uneasy. The language was specific and procedural, but the content was bizarre. What kind of checkpoint needed rules about mysterious lights and impossible occurrences? He looked up at Chen, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "I have questions," Marcus said carefully. "These rules seem unusual for a standard border checkpoint." "This is not a standard border checkpoint," Chen replied. Her tone indicated the conversation was over. She stood and gestured for Marcus to follow her. She led him through the facility, showing him the essential areas. The main office, where he would spend most of his time. The break room with its humming refrigerator and small table. The bathroom, a storage closet containing basic supplies and a first aid kit. Finally, she showed him the control panel for the gate arm. A simple system with a red button to lower the gate and a green button to raise it. Your shift starts tonight at sunset, Chen said, checking her watch. That gives you about 3 hours. I suggest you rest and prepare mentally. This job requires focus and strict adherence to protocol. People who cannot follow instructions do not last long here. What happened to the last person who worked this shift? Marcus asked. The question came out before he could stop himself. Chen's expression darkened slightly. He stopped following the rules, she said simply. Then she walked past Marcus toward the front entrance. I will be back tomorrow morning at sunrise for the shift change. Do not call me unless there is a genuine emergency. Do not leave the facility. Do not deviate from the rules. She paused at the door and turned back. One more thing. Some nights will test your perception of reality. Remember that the rules exist to protect you. Trust them even when your instincts tell you otherwise. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in the artificial cool of the checkpoint office. He spent the next 2 hours preparing. He made coffee in the break room, using the ancient machine he found in a cabinet. He ate a sandwich he had brought from home. He read through the rule card a dozen more times, trying to memorize every detail. He explored the facility, more thoroughly noting emergency exits and the locations of all light switches. He checked the approved name list kept in the desk drawer. It contained maybe 20 names, all formatted the same way. Last name, comma, first name, comma, a series of numbers that might have been identification codes. Nothing else. No photos. No additional information. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Marcus watched through the office window as shadows grew longer and the quality of light changed. Something about the approaching darkness filled him with inexplicable dread. He told himself it was just nerves, a new job in a strange place. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger as the sun sank lower. At exactly the moment the bottom edge of the sun touched the horizon, an alarm began beeping from the control panel. Marcus walked over and found a digital timer displaying the message shift start. He pressed the acknowledgement button and the beeping stopped. The timer reset and began counting up from 0. His shift had officially begun. For the first hour, nothing happened. The road remained empty in both directions. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The radio crackled with occasional bursts of static, but no voices. Marcus sat in the office chair, watching the empty road and trying not to think about how isolated the checkpoint was. No cell phone signal this far into the desert. No visible signs of civilization in any direction. Just him and the empty road and the rules. The first vehicle appeared around 8 in the evening. Headlights crested a rise to the north, moving fast. Marcus stood and moved to the window. The vehicle was a semi-truck hauling a long trailer. It approached the checkpoint in the southbound lane and passed through without slowing. Marcus remembered Rule 3. Do not attempt to stop them. Do not make eye contact with their occupants. Do not acknowledge their presence in any way. He looked away as the truck passed. In his peripheral vision, he caught a glimpse of the cab. The driver's window was down despite the heat. The driver appeared to be wearing something over their face. A mask, maybe, or something else. Marcus forced himself to focus on the wall instead. The truck rumbled past and disappeared into the southern darkness. 3 more vehicles passed over the next 2 hours. A sedan, a pickup truck, another semi. None of them slowed. None of them acknowledged the checkpoint's existence. Marcus followed Rule 3 each time, looking away and trying not to think about what he might have seen if he had looked directly at them. At 10:45, the radio crackled to life with something that might have been a voice. The sound was distorted and layered, as if multiple people were speaking simultaneously in frequencies just outside normal human range. Marcus felt a strong urge to respond, to adjust the radio and try to clarify the transmission. He reached for the volume knob, then stopped, remembering Rule 7. The radio will sometimes emit sounds that resemble voices. Ignore them. Do not attempt to respond. He pulled his hand back and focused on his breathing. After maybe 2 minutes, the sounds faded back to static. Midnight arrived. The timer on the control panel showed exactly 6 hours elapsed. Marcus got up to use the bathroom and grab a bottle of water from the break room. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer than before, though he could not tell if that was real or just his imagination. The facility felt different at night. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper. The air conditioning created sounds that almost resembled whispers when the compressor kicked on. He was back in the office chair when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on the door. Marcus froze. His first instinct was to check who was there. Someone might need help. But Rule 8 was explicit. Between the hours of midnight and 3 in the morning, you may hear knocking on the office door or windows. Do not investigate the source. Do not open any doors or windows. Continue your normal duties. The knocking will eventually stop. He stayed in his chair. The knocking came again. 3 raps. Then silence. Then 3 more raps. The pattern repeated every 30 seconds or so. Each iteration made Marcus more anxious. What if someone really needed help? What if another employee was outside? But Chen's warning echoed in his mind. The rules exist to protect you. Trust them even when your instincts tell you otherwise. The knocking continued for nearly 40 minutes. Sometimes it came from the door, sometimes from the windows. Sometimes it seemed to come from the walls themselves. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, forcing himself to focus on his primary duty. A pickup truck passed, heading south. He did not look at it. The knocking eventually stopped as abruptly as it began. The silence that followed was somehow worse. At 1:15 in the morning, Marcus noticed lights in the desert. They appeared to the west, maybe half a mile from the checkpoint. small points of illumination moving in a deliberate pattern, up and down, side to side, drawing shapes against the darkness. He watched for a few seconds, fascinated despite himself. The lights moved with purpose and intelligence. They seemed to be responding to each other, forming geometric patterns that were almost hypnotic. Then he remembered Rule 9. If you see lights in the desert moving in patterns that seem deliberate or intelligent, do not watch them for more than a few seconds. Return your attention to the road. The lights cannot approach the checkpoint, but prolonged observation can attract unwanted attention. He tore his gaze away and focused on the empty road. From the corner of his eye, he could still see the lights. They seemed to pulse brighter for a moment, as if reacting to his attention. Then, gradually, they faded and disappeared. The next 2 hours passed in relative quiet. A few more vehicles traveled south. The radio occasionally crackled with those layered, almost voices. Marcus drank coffee and tried to stay alert, fighting the natural tendency toward drowsiness that came with overnight work. The isolation was getting to him, the endless darkness beyond the checkpoint lights, the absence of any human contact, the weight of the rules and their implications about what might be out there in the desert night. At 3:30, a vehicle approached from the north with its hazard lights flashing. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finally, something that fell within normal protocol. He stood and checked the approved name list, making sure he had it memorized. The vehicle was an older model sedan. It pulled up to the gate and stopped. Marcus took a deep breath and walked outside. The night air was cooler than expected. A breeze had picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dust. The sedan sat idling at the gate. Marcus could see a figure behind the wheel, but the details were obscured by darkness. He approached the driver's side window, following procedure exactly as outlined in Rule 5. The window rolled down as he approached. The driver was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and gray streaked hair. She held out a laminated identification card without being asked. Marcus took it and angled it toward the checkpoint lights to read. The name was Sarah Mendoza. He mentally reviewed the approved list. The name was there, third from the top. "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said. He handed back the identification and walked to the control panel. He pressed the green button, and the gate arm began to rise. The sedan drove through without the driver saying a word. Marcus watched it disappear into the southern darkness, then lowered the gate again. His hands were shaking slightly. That should have been routine, but something about the entire interaction felt wrong. The woman's eyes had been focused on something past him, through him, as if he was not quite real. 2 more vehicles with hazard lights stopped before sunrise. The protocol was the same each time. Check identification, verify against the list, raise the gate. Both drivers were on the approved list. Both passed through without incident. But but Marcus noticed details that bothered him. The second driver's identification photo showed a man maybe 30 years old, but the person behind the wheel appeared at least 60. The third driver handed over identification for someone named Robert Chen. But when Marcus checked the approved list, he found the name listed as Roberto Chen, close enough that he decided to allow passage, but the discrepancy nagged at him. At 4:30, Marcus saw something in the desert that made him question his sanity. A figure walking parallel to the road, maybe 100 yards out. It was too dark to make out details, but the silhouette was unmistakably human. Someone walking alone through the desert at night. Marcus immediately thought of Rule 11. If at any point during your shift you see a person walking alone in the desert, do not offer assistance. Do not attempt communication. Do not shine lights in their direction. People who walk the desert at night are not looking for help, but every instinct screamed at him to do something. The desert at night was deadly. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, dangerous wildlife. Whoever was out there needed help. He stood and moved toward the door. His hand was on the handle when he stopped. The rules exist to protect you. Trust them, even when your instincts tell you otherwise. He forced himself back to the chair and kept his eyes on the road. The figure continued walking, slowly disappearing into the darkness. The last hour of his shift dragged endlessly. Exhaustion was setting in both physical and mental. The strangeness of the night had accumulated into a heavy weight, pressing down on his consciousness. He kept replaying moments in his mind. The layered voices on the radio, the persistent knocking, the geometric patterns of lights in the desert, the woman's unfocused eyes, the lone figure walking through the wasteland. None of it made conventional sense, but all of it felt connected somehow. The first hint of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon around 5:45. The sky gradually shifted from black to deep blue to purple. Marcus watched the sunrise with profound relief. The timer alarm beeped at the exact moment the sun's edge cleared the horizon. Shift end. He pressed the acknowledgement button and sat back in the chair, feeling the tension drain from his body. Chen arrived 10 minutes later. She entered through the front door, looking exactly as she had the previous afternoon. Same severe expression, same unreadable eyes. She scanned the office and then focused on Marcus. Any incidents, she asked. Marcus hesitated. The rules said to document unusual events in the incident log, but they also said not to discuss them with anyone. He decided to interpret anyone as meaning people outside the facility. Chen clearly knew what went on here. Knocking between midnight and 3, he said. Lights in the desert around 1:30. One vehicle passed heading south that I didn't get a good look at. 3 vehicles stopped with hazards. All were on the approved list. One person walking in the desert around 4:30. Chen nodded as if this was entirely normal. Did you follow all protocols? She asked. Marcus confirmed that he had. "Did you document everything in the incident log?" Marcus realized he had not. He quickly pulled out the log from the desk drawer and began writing. Chen watched him complete the entries, then collected the log and read through his descriptions. After a moment, she nodded. "Acceptable," she said. "Your payment for the first night will be delivered with your weekly total on Friday. Return at sunset tonight for your next shift." She dismissed him with a gesture, and Marcus gathered his belongings, grateful to escape into the daylight. The drive back to Phoenix felt surreal. The normal world seemed impossibly bright and loud after the isolated darkness of the checkpoint. Marcus stopped at a diner for breakfast and sat in a booth trying to process what he had experienced. Part of him wanted to believe it was all some elaborate prank or psychological test. But the rules had been too specific, the events too precisely aligned with their warnings. Something was genuinely strange about that checkpoint and the desert surrounding it. He slept for most of the day in his cramped studio apartment. Dreams came in fragments, geometric lights, writing messages he could not read, knocking that echoed from inside his own chest. Figures walking through endless sand, their faces turned away. He woke in the late afternoon, feeling unrested and anxious about returning to the checkpoint. But the money was real, and he desperately needed it. $2,000 a week would solve his immediate problems and buy him time to figure out a better long-term solution. The second night began much like the first. Marcus arrived an hour before sunset. The checkpoint looked exactly the same. Nothing had changed, except perhaps the quality of light as evening approached. Chen was waiting in the office. She handed him the rule card without comment and left before the sun touched the horizon. Marcus acknowledged the shift start alarm and settled in for another night. The first 3 hours were quiet. A handful of vehicles passed heading south. Marcus followed Rule 3 and avoided looking at them directly. The radio crackled occasionally, but produced no voices. No knocking came from the doors or windows. He began to relax slightly, thinking maybe the first night had been an anomaly. Maybe not every shift would be so eventful. Then, at 10:30, a vehicle approached from the north and stopped at the gate. No hazard lights. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Rule 6. If someone stops at the gate without their hazards, do not approach the vehicle. Return to the office immediately and lock all doors. Do not look at the vehicle. Do not respond to any attempts at communication. Wait exactly 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, the vehicle will be gone. He stood and walked quickly back into the office, keeping his eyes away from the vehicle. He locked the front door and then moved through the facility, locking the break room door and the bathroom door. Back in the office, he sat in the chair and focused on the timer. He had noted the time, 10:32. He needed to wait until 11:02. The vehicle outside began honking its horn. long, sustained blasts that echoed across the empty desert. Marcus clenched his jaw and stared at the timer. Do not respond to any attempts at communication. The honking continued for several minutes, then stopped. Silence fell. Marcus counted seconds in his head, trying to distract himself from the urge to look outside and see if the vehicle was still there. A voice called from outside. "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help. My car broke down. Please." The voice sounded desperate and genuine. Every social instinct Marcus possessed demanded that he respond, that he help someone in need, but the rules were absolute. Do not respond to any attempts at communication. He kept his eyes on the timer. 11:07. 25 minutes to go. The voice continued calling, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. Sometimes it seemed to change, becoming deeper or higher pitched, as if different people were speaking. At one point, it sounded exactly like his mother, which was impossible because his mother had been dead for 3 years. Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes and focused on breathing. Trust the rules. The rules exist to protect you. At exactly 11:02, the timer showed 30 minutes elapsed. Marcus waited an additional 10 minutes per the instructions. At 11:12, he cautiously unlocked the office door and looked outside. The gate area was empty. No vehicle, no tire tracks in the dust that he could see from this distance. Nothing to indicate anyone had been there at all. He checked the road in both directions. Empty. Whatever had stopped at the checkpoint was gone. He documented the incident in the log with shaking hands. Vehicle stopped without hazards at 10:32. Followed Rule 6 protocol. Subject departed after 30 minutes. No other interaction. He read it over several times, trying to convince himself that what happened was covered by standard procedure, that there was a rational explanation. But the memory of that voice shifting and changing kept playing in his mind. The rest of the night was worse. The knocking started at midnight and was more aggressive than the previous night. Not just 3 measured raps, but sustained pounding that rattled the windows. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, following Rule 8. Do not investigate. Do not open doors or windows. Continue normal duties. A semi-truck passed heading south, and he dutifully looked away. The pounding continued for over an hour. The lights appeared in the desert around 2 in the morning. This time, they were closer, still at least several hundred yards away, but clearly visible and moving with purpose. They formed shapes that resembled letters or symbols from an alphabet Marcus did not recognize. He watched for exactly 3 seconds, then forced his attention back to the road. The lights pulsed brighter. In his peripheral vision, they seemed to move closer. He kept his eyes locked forward. After several minutes, the lights gradually faded, though he had the distinct impression they were still there, just beyond the range of visible spectrum. At 3:15, another vehicle with hazards approached and stopped at the gate. Marcus welcomed the return to standard protocol. He checked the approved list and went outside to verify identification. The driver was an older man with leathery skin and eyes that reflected the checkpoint lights in an odd way. He handed over an identification card for someone named James Torres. Marcus checked the list. The name was there near the bottom. He raised the gate and the vehicle passed through. As it drove away, Marcus noticed something in the passenger seat. A shape that might have been another person, but the proportions seemed wrong. Too tall and thin. Limbs bent at angles that human joints could not achieve. He blinked, and the shape was gone, or maybe had never been there at all. Just a trick of shadows and exhaustion. He documented it in the log anyway. Rule 12. If you witness anything that violates the natural order or seems impossible, write a detailed description in the incident log. The sun rose at 5:58. Marcus acknowledged the shift end alarm and sat back, feeling hollowed out by the experience. Chen arrived exactly on schedule. She collected the incident log and read through his entries. Her expression revealed nothing. When she finished, she looked at Marcus with those sharp, dark eyes. "You are adapting well," she said. "Most people break during the second night. The strangeness becomes too much, and they abandon protocol, but you followed the rules. That shows discipline." "What is this place?" Marcus asked. The question came out hoarse from hours of silence. "What are we really doing here?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. She seemed to be weighing how much to tell him. Finally, she said, "This checkpoint monitors a boundary. Not a political border, but something else. Something older. There are places in the world where the normal rules do not fully apply, where reality is thinner. This stretch of desert is one of them. Our job is to manage the crossing, to maintain order at the threshold. The rules exist because previous employees learned through trial and error what protocols keep everyone safe. Follow them exactly, and you will be fine. Deviate, and the consequences are severe." She handed him an envelope. Inside was $200 in cash. Partial payment for 2 nights' work. "The rest will be delivered Friday," she said. "Get some rest. You look terrible. Return at sunset." Marcus drove home in a daze. Chen's explanation had answered nothing, while somehow making everything worse. A boundary between what and what? What was crossing, and why did it need to be managed? What were the consequences of breaking the rules? He wanted to ask her all of these questions, but something told him she would not or could not provide more details. He was supposed to follow procedure without understanding a gear in a machine whose purpose remained obscure. The third night, Marcus arrived at the checkpoint with a sense of grim determination. He had spent the day researching the area, trying to find information about the facility or its history. There was nothing. No records of a checkpoint at these coordinates. No mention in any federal database he could access. Even satellite imagery showed only empty desert where the building should be. Either the facility was completely off the books, or something was preventing it from being documented through normal channels. Chen was waiting as always. She handed over the rule card, and Marcus noticed for the first time that the lamination was yellowed with age. The edges were worn smooth from countless handling. "How long has this checkpoint been here?" he asked. Chen smiled slightly. It had no humor in it. "Long enough," she said. "Longer than anyone currently remembers." Then she left, and Marcus was alone again. The shift started at sunset. For the first time, Marcus felt like he was developing a rhythm. He knew what to expect, knew how to steel himself against the strange events that would unfold. He was wrong. The third night was worse than the previous two combined. The vehicles that passed heading south seemed more numerous. They came in groups of 3 or 4, separated by long intervals of nothing. Marcus avoided looking at them, but he could not help noticing details in his peripheral vision. They were all moving at exactly the same speed. Their headlights cast illumination that seemed wrong somehow. Too flat, too gray. The sounds of their engines did not quite match the visual motion, creating a subtle disconnect that made his brain itch. At 9 o'clock, the radio came alive with those layered voices. This time, Marcus could almost make out words, fragments of sentences in languages he did not recognize. Some he recognized: Spanish, English, something that might have been Arabic or Farsi. Others were completely unfamiliar. The voices spoke over each other, creating a cacophony that was almost painful to hear. They seemed to be arguing or negotiating, making demands or offers. Marcus followed Rule 7 and did not respond. After 20 minutes, the voices faded, but the feeling of presence remained, as if whatever had been speaking was still there, listening through the static. At 10:15, a vehicle stopped at the gate without hazards. Rule 6. Marcus immediately retreated to the office and locked all doors. But tonight, the vehicle did not just honk or call out. It began ramming the gate. Loud metallic crashes echoed across the desert as something heavy repeatedly struck the barrier. The gate arm bent, but held. Marcus sat in the office trying to maintain composure. The rule said wait 30 minutes. The vehicle will be gone. He started the timer and focused on breathing. The ramming continued for 10 minutes, then stopped. Silence fell. Marcus waited, not daring to check the timer. Then he heard footsteps. Someone walking around the building. Slow, deliberate steps that circled the entire perimeter, testing doors and windows, looking for entry points. The footsteps were too heavy to be human. Each impact sounded like stone or metal on concrete. They completed one full circuit, then another. On the third circuit, they stopped directly outside the office window. Marcus could see a shadow through the glass. A shape that was roughly human-sized, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, arms too long, head the wrong shape. It stood perfectly still for what felt like an eternity. Marcus did not move, did not breathe. just waited following the protocol. After maybe 5 minutes, the footsteps resumed. They completed the circuit and moved away toward the road. Marcus checked the timer. 28 minutes elapsed. 2 more to go. At exactly 30 minutes, the timer alarm went off. Marcus waited the additional 10 minutes, then cautiously looked outside. The vehicle was gone. The gate arm was bent at an angle, but still functional. No footprints in the dust, no evidence that anything had been there. He documented it all in the log, his hands shaking so badly the writing was barely legible. The knocking started early tonight, 11:30 instead of midnight, and it was more violent than any previous night. Sustained pounding that shook the windows in their frames. Something was throwing itself against the doors with enough force that Marcus worried they would fail. He sat in the office chair, gripping the armrests and reciting the rules in his head. Do not investigate. Do not open doors or windows. The rules exist to protect you. Trust them. At midnight exactly, all the lights went out again. Total darkness. But this time Marcus could hear things moving outside. Multiple entities circling the building, scratching at walls, testing the structure, looking for weaknesses. He stayed perfectly still in the darkness, listening to them. After 10 minutes, he heard Chen's voice from outside. Marcus, can you hear me? Something's wrong with my car. I need you to let me in. Please. It was a perfect imitation. Same tone, same inflection, but Marcus knew Chen would never return during his shift. The rules existed to protect you. He did not respond. The voice tried again. Marcus, please. I'm scared. Something is out here. You have to help me. The pleading sounded so genuine that for a moment Marcus almost stood up, almost moved toward the door. Then he remembered the woman in the sedan, the fear in her voice. This was a test. The voice continued for 15 minutes, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes crying. Marcus sat in the darkness and waited. Eventually, the voice stopped. The scratching and circling stopped. The lights flickered back on. Outside, through the window, Marcus could see nothing but empty desert. He checked the timer. 12:32. The worst hour had passed. The rest of the night was chaos. Vehicles with hazards stopped every 20 minutes. Marcus processed each one following protocol. But the drivers were increasingly strange. One had eyes that reflected light like an animal. Another spoke with multiple voices simultaneously. A third handed over identification that was written in symbols instead of letters. But somehow Marcus could still read the name. All of them were on the approved list. All of them passed through. Between the approved vehicles came the lights, dancing across the road, forming patterns that resembled circuit boards or neural networks. They moved closer than ever before stopping just inches from the perimeter. Marcus could feel them probing, testing, looking for any gap in his attention or discipline that would allow them through. He followed Rule 9. Do not watch for more than a few seconds. Return attention to the road. But it took all his willpower not to stare at the hypnotic patterns they created. At 4:45, Marcus saw multiple figures walking in the desert. Not just one, but dozens. All moving in the same direction, all maintaining perfect spacing between them, like soldiers on patrol or pilgrims on some sacred journey. He followed Rule 11 and did not offer assistance, did not attempt communication, just watched them pass in his peripheral vision, their faces forever turned away. The sun rose at 6:03. Marcus acknowledged the shift end alarm and collapsed back in the chair. He felt utterly drained, physically exhausted, and mentally frayed. Chen arrived and immediately assessed his condition. She read the incident log carefully. When she finished, she looked at Marcus with something that might have been concern. Tonight was difficult, she said. The calendar shows certain dates when the boundary becomes more permeable. Last night was one of them. Activity was significantly increased. You handled it well. Many would have broken under that pressure. Marcus wanted to ask what date it was, what calendar she was referring to, but he was too tired to form the words. Chen handed him his payment, $400 for 3 nights. The balance will come Friday, she said. Take tomorrow off. Rest. Recover. Return the following night. The worst is over for now. The boundary will stabilize and things will return to normal levels. He drove home barely able to keep his eyes open. Slept for 16 hours straight, dreamed of lights and voices and figures walking through endless darkness. When he woke, he felt slightly more human. He checked his bank account. The money from the first 3 nights had been deposited exactly as Chen promised. It was real. All of it was real. The 4th night, Marcus returned to find Chen waiting with a different expression. Almost apologetic. I should warn you, she said. After an active night like the previous one, there is often a period of increased quiet. Do not let that lull you into complacency. The boundary is always active, always watching, always testing. Maintain your discipline regardless of how calm things seem. She was right. The 4th night was eerily quiet. Only a handful of vehicles passed heading south. No knocking at midnight. No lights in the desert. 2 vehicles with hazards stopped, and both were processed without incident. By 3 in the morning, Marcus found himself more anxious than he had been during the chaos of the previous night. The silence felt wrong, like held breath before a scream. At 4:30, the figure appeared again, walking parallel to the road in the darkness. But this time, Marcus watched it more carefully, without looking directly. There was something deeply wrong about the way it moved. Too smooth. No bobbing motion of walking. More like gliding. And it cast no shadow despite the checkpoint lights. They regarded each other across the distance. Marcus held perfectly still, maintaining the protocol. After several seconds, the figure turned and continued walking south. It faded into the darkness, and was gone. Marcus documented everything: the quiet, the figure, the sense of wrongness that permeated the entire shift. Chen read his log entries and nodded. The boundary sometimes mimics calm, she said, testing to see if you will relax your vigilance. You maintained protocol. That is what matters. She paid him and dismissed him. Only 3 more nights this week. Then you will have completed your first full week. After that, most people develop better instincts for the work. The 5th and 6th nights followed similar patterns, relative quiet punctuated by brief moments of intensity. Vehicles passing south. Occasional voices on the radio. Knocking that lasted only minutes instead of hours. Lights that stayed distant. Marcus began to understand the rhythm. The checkpoint was a living thing with moods and cycles. Some nights it tested aggressively. Others it watched and waited. But it was always there, always aware of his presence. On Friday morning, Chen arrived with a thick envelope, $2,000, cash as promised. She counted it out carefully and had Marcus sign a receipt. You have completed your first week, she said. Most people quit at this point. The accumulated strangeness becomes too much, but I think you will stay. You have the temperament for this work, the ability to follow rules without needing to understand why. That quality is rare and valuable. Do you want to continue, she asked. The pay remains the same, $2,000 per week. Shift schedule remains sunset to sunrise, 7 days a week. All rules and protocols remain in effect. The only change is that after the first month, you may request 1 day off per week if needed. Do you accept these terms? Marcus thought about it. The work was strange and isolating and occasionally terrifying. But the money was real and consistent. More importantly, he felt drawn to understand more about the checkpoint and its purpose. The mystery had hooked him despite the fear. He nodded. I accept, he said. Good Chen replied. Welcome to permanent employment. One final thing. After completing the first week, most employees experience certain changes. Dreams become more vivid. Perception sharpens in unusual ways. You may notice things in the normal world that you did not see before. Patterns, connections, thin places where reality feels less solid. This is normal. It does not mean you are losing your mind. It means you are becoming attuned to what exists beyond the usual boundaries. Do not be alarmed. Simply observe and document if necessary. She left, and Marcus drove home with $2,000 in cash and a head full of questions. That night, he dreamed more vividly than ever before. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. Figures walked between the dunes. Lights wrote messages in languages that predated human speech. And at the center of it all stood the checkpoint. A small concrete building that somehow contained the weight of keeping 2 worlds separate. The 7th night, Marcus returned with a sense of purpose. He was no longer just following rules blindly. He was beginning to understand his role. The The checkpoint was a gate, and he was its keeper. His job was not to understand what lay on either side, but to maintain the threshold, to allow controlled passage while preventing unauthorized crossing. The rules were the mechanism by which this was accomplished. Each one addressed a specific way the boundary could be tested or breached. The night proceeded according to the patterns he had learned. Vehicles south, radio voices, brief knocking, distant lights, 2 approved passages, 1 figure walking. He documented everything with precision. When sunrise came, he felt a strange satisfaction. He had completed a full week, had proven he could handle the work, had become part of something larger than himself, even if he did not fully comprehend what that something was. Chen arrived and reviewed his work. "Excellent," she said. "You are developing the instincts, learning to read the subtle signs. This is good. The checkpoint needs reliable people. Too many quit or break or worse. But you are stable, disciplined. The boundary respects that." She handed him his payment for the night. "Continue this trajectory, and there may be opportunities for advancement. Other facilities, different roles, but that is for later. For now, focus on mastering this position." Marcus took the money and left. He drove through the desert as the sun climbed higher, thinking about Chen's words. Other facilities, different roles. How many checkpoints like this existed? How many people worked in this hidden infrastructure, maintaining boundaries between realities? The scope of it was staggering. Over the following weeks, Marcus settled into a routine. The strangeness became familiar. He learned to recognize patterns in the phenomena. Which nights would be active and which would be quiet. How to identify vehicles that were truly seeking passage versus those testing the boundary. The subtle differences between lights that were merely observing and those probing for weakness. He became efficient at his work, precise in his documentation, a reliable keeper of the threshold. Chen began treating him differently, with respect bordering on collegiality. She shared more information, though never complete explanations. The checkpoint had existed for at least 70 years, maybe longer. Records were incomplete or deliberately obscured. It monitored a natural thin place in reality, where something old and vast pressed against the normal world. The approved list contained names of people or entities that had earned permission to cross. How they earned that permission, Chen would not say. Breaking the rules weakened the boundary. Severe violations could allow things through that should remain contained. Previous keepers who broke protocol were never seen again, either consumed by what came through or taken to the other side as consequence. Marcus absorbed this information and continued his work. He stopped questioning the fundamental nature of what he was guarding, stopped trying to rationalize the impossible things he witnessed. Simply accepted that reality was larger and stranger than conventional understanding allowed. His job was to maintain order at one small point where the strange and normal intersected. Nothing more, nothing less. Months passed. The work became almost meditative, each night following the same essential structure. Monitor the road. Process approved passages. Ignore tests and probes. Document anomalies. Trust the rules absolutely. The routine created a strange sense of peace. Out in the desert, at the threshold between worlds, Marcus found a purpose he had never experienced in his previous life. He was no longer just surviving. He was serving a function that mattered in ways he could not fully articulate. One night during his 4th month, Chen arrived at shift change with a different expression. Serious, but not concerned, she waited while Marcus completed his final log entry, then said, "We need to talk. There is an opportunity. Another facility needs a keeper. Larger operation, more complex protocols, significantly higher pay. I recommended you based on your performance here. The position is yours if you want it." Marcus considered. Part of him had grown attached to this checkpoint, to the specific patterns of its phenomena, to the rhythm of its nights, but curiosity won out. "Where is it?" he asked. Chen smiled slightly. "Farther south," she said. "Deep in territory you do not find on normal maps. The boundary there is more active, the responsibilities more demanding, but the work is essentially the same. Follow rules. Maintain the threshold. Keep what should stay separate from mixing. If you accept, I will train your replacement here. You would transfer in 2 weeks." Marcus thought about his life before the checkpoint. The debt and desperation, the sense of purposelessness, then thought about what he had now. Stable income, strange but meaningful work, a place in a hidden system that kept reality functioning. The choice was obvious. "I accept," he said. Chen nodded as if she had expected this answer. "Good," she said. "Report here as usual for the next 2 weeks. I will handle the transition logistics. After that, you will begin the next phase of your career. Welcome to the deeper levels of the service. Not everyone makes it this far. You should be proud." Over the final 2 weeks, Marcus trained his replacement, a woman named Sarah, who had the same desperate edge he remembered from his first day. He taught her the rules, showed her how to read the patterns, explained the importance of absolute discipline. She listened with wide eyes and growing dread. On her first solo night, Marcus waited outside in his car, ready to intervene if needed. She followed protocol perfectly. When dawn came, she looked shaken but intact. Chen nodded approval. "She will do well," Chen said, "has the right instincts." Marcus's last night at the checkpoint was quiet, as if the boundary was acknowledging his departure with respect. Only a few vehicles passed. One approved crossing. No aggressive testing. The lights stayed distant and gentle. At sunrise, Chen arrived with his final payment and a thick packet of documents. "Your new assignment," she said. "Read these carefully. The facility operates on different principles, but the fundamental truth remains the same. Follow the rules. Maintain the threshold. Trust the system. She shook his hand formally. You have done well here, Marcus Webb. The boundary will remember you. Serve the next post with the same discipline, and you will go far in this service. Marcus drove away from the checkpoint for the last time. In the rearview mirror, it shrank to a small shape against the vast desert, then disappeared entirely. But he carried it with him. The lessons learned, the understanding gained, the knowledge that reality was far stranger and more carefully maintained than most people would ever know. He thought about his first night, the fear and confusion, the desperate urge to break rules and follow normal human instincts, then thought about his last night, the calm competence, the acceptance of mystery without needing explanation. He had changed in fundamental ways, become something more than he was before, a keeper of boundaries, a guardian of thresholds, a servant of the hidden infrastructure that kept worlds from colliding. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere far to the south, his next assignment waited. Another checkpoint, another boundary, more rules to follow and mysteries to witness. But Marcus felt ready. He had learned the essential truth that Chen tried to teach him from the beginning. Some knowledge cannot be explained. Some duties cannot be questioned. Some borders exist not to keep people out, but to keep something far worse contained within. And someone has to stand watch in the darkness, making sure those borders hold. Marcus drove south into the rising sun, leaving the familiar checkpoint behind. But the work would continue. It always continued, day after day, night after night. Keepers watching boundaries, following rules written in blood and experience, maintaining the fragile separation between what is and what should never be. This was his life now, his purpose, his calling. And deep in the desert behind him, the checkpoint stood sentinel against the darkness. A new keeper learning the patterns, the rules unchanged, the boundary holding. For now, for always, for as long as someone remained willing to stand watch and trust that some rules exist for reasons beyond understanding. Some borders must be maintained at any cost, and some jobs require people willing to witness the impossible and still show up the next night, ready to do it all over again. This was the story of how Marcus Webb learned these truths, how a desperate man took a strange job and found purpose in protecting a boundary he could not fully comprehend. How following rules without explanation became the most important work he would ever do. This was the story of the checkpoint, and it never truly ends, because the boundary never sleeps. The threshold never closes, and there will always be a need for those willing to stand watch in the darkness and keep what should stay separate from mixing. Marcus drove on. The desert surrounded him. The sun climbed higher, and somewhere far ahead, another checkpoint waited. Another set of rules to follow, another boundary to maintain. The work would continue. It always continued, and he was ready.